So I think it's wise to start with the Alphabase, since this is basically the backbone of everything. As you may know, the Alphabase has the patterns and the kits separate, so you can change the pattern without changing the kit, but you can also change the kit without changing the pattern. And if you want to change both, you have to change one and the other. So some people find it logical, some people find it illogical. That's not the way of working of most other drum machines. Personally, I think it works. So I had only prepared 3 kits. So when you go into kit, I had 1, 2, and 3. And basically just one pattern. This is pattern 4 here. I think the Alphabase sequencer is pretty easy to edit live. So I had just one pattern, which I think is fairly basic and open. And I prepared a few things, like I changed some hats at some times, or ride patterns, whatever. It's not too complicated. So that's the way I decided to do it. And so, but the kits, they're a bit different. They each take care of having a different kick, because it's a bit boring to have the same kick during 55 minutes. Some different rolling toms to have some subs. The hats are different, even though I changed the samples during the performance. After a while, you know that sample number 20 is fine and 15 is fine, and do not go on 16 because it's going to sound bad. So I know the samples that work and those that work less well. I haven't changed anything. Everything is the stock samples. I have never tried importing my own because I'm lazy, because maybe I think since these work, I don't mind. So the first kit, I don't know if I used all of the 11 instruments. I had one kick, kind of dull, a bit 808. So that's the kick. And then I started the EQ at max value, but you can, of course, as the show goes on, you can remove some EQ and have some more attack and pulse going through. It's a bit harder hitting, but I think it works well at the beginning with more EQ. And then, so yeah. Then you can always increase the attack. I don't mess much with the pitch and everything while it's playing. That's the purpose of kit in my mind, to have different pitch or different tonalities. But yeah, the basic sound, I just mess with the EQ. Then the membrane, to be honest, never use it. I thought when I bought the Alphabase that I was the one who would be able to crack the membrane, but so far I haven't, and I haven't really tried really. So I never even use snares, so what's the point? But it's capable of much more. It's just I've never really messed with it. So maybe one day. The hat, classic. It's going through some reverb, which was on the send. It's not the internal reverb, it's eventide space. Then open hat. Like I said, I changed the samples during the performance, but these are the basic ones. A clap, just in case. I don't think the claps had a pattern going, so I just entered the claps when I wanted it. I don't use claps that much, but sometimes when you're in a passage that's quite driving, it's nice to add some claps. Then a rim shot, which here was a tom. I don't think I've used it. Then the crash. The crash I usually use, don't ask me why, usually use as my tom channel. So that's usually where my rolling toms are. So This was the tom I chose to have here. So it's what kind of sample is it? It's actually sort of a snare, but heavily filtered, which turns it into a tom. Then a ride, because I like the ride. Classic. I think it's going into some reverb as well. The tom might have been going through an El Capistan delay. Then I think I had two percussive sounds to make some more. Example 2 was more hairy hats to have to pepper around, and this one, what is it? Sort of a rim shot maybe. These two I changed during the performance. The FM synth, I don't think I've used it at all. So yeah, and if you start the drum machine, that's the pattern with everything going on at once, which wasn't the case all the time. Let's imagine that's kind of the first pattern. And so the idea is that you can change the kit and keep the same pattern. So what I try to do is use one kit, then half the kit, remove the toms and the subs and use the modular to make the subs, then change the kit to the second one. Obviously I try to mute most of the instrument before changing the kit, otherwise it's a bit too all at once. But that's my second kit. But that's the same pattern and it's quite different actually. So it's all a question of the sound, so that's why I don't mind really having just one pattern. So like I said, I think the subs are one of the most difficult thing to have something consistent. So I was trying to have either toms or something on the modular doing the sub. So once there's subs with the toms and once there's something with the modular, and I was trying to always balance this to always have something going. Obviously with some mutes and fading with the mixer in the modular and the volume on the Alphabase. So my second kit, like I said, same pattern, but the kick is much harder hitting, closer to 909. Membrane, still nothing. The hats, a bit harder hitting as well. Still some reverb, which I could remove, but who cares? Clap is a bit different as well, but same. The advantage of the Alphabase, it's quite knobby, so you can easily access, like on the clap, you can easily access the filter and change the sound. It's a high pass filter here, but you can put a low pass. The screen is small, but honestly, it's easy to operate live once you have a little experience with it, of course. Rim shot, basically nothing. The crash is the main sound here because it's the tom again. And once again, I don't know what kind of sample is it. So I don't know. Something with, there's a lot of filtering going on, but there's also an LFO moving the filter all internally. And since the filters sound really good, I tend to use them a lot. And another ride that's quite harsh, but it's hard hitting, it's nice. Ooh, a little cool bell on there. And another nice hat. And the FM synth as well. I think I've tried to use it once and it didn't really work out. So yeah, that's the second kit, which if you start the sequencer, turns out like this. if you've listened to the Resilience Live, you might recognize a good chunk of the set with this playing in the background. And so the last kit, number 3, was this. Honestly, I'm not even sure I've used the toms, the low toms, on this pattern. I think it was just something playing on the modular. But yeah, once again, the sound there, the kick it's duller and akin to the first kick, but a bit different. Works well to end the set on a deeper note. Once again, membrane, nothing. 2 hats. Again, a big clap, but I'm not certain I've used it at that point of the set. Nothing on the rim shot. Like I said, the crash. Not sure I've used it. I don't think so. A very electrical ride. What I did as well during the set is you can add some noise to any of the instruments before. I think it's before the filter. And so there are a ton of different metallic noises you can use, and I think it works well with the ride. And so sometimes I bring the metallic noise, it turns into sort of a FM percussion, and I really like the sound. It can be quite harsh, but that's what the filters are there for. So you have to be a bit used to the settings. If you do that completely live, then you never used it, you might have a bad surprise with the volumes, etc. But yeah, if you've used it in your production a few times, I think the noise is really useful in conjunction with the VCA, envelope, filter, LFO, envelope, filter, mount. You can do amazing things with that. But yeah, on its own, it's quite harsh. Again, 2 little additional percussion on the sample channel. All those are sample channel, but those are completely digital. There's no filter. And the FM synth, I think I had prepared something on the 3rd kit, but I don't think I've used it. I had plenty of synth on the modular already, so yeah, it was easier to prepare something on the modular. So here's once again the full kit playing. Like I said, with the ride, you can tailor it to sounds the way you want. There's a lot you can do with this. It doesn't sound really good here, but if you spend a little time with it, it's worth it. There's a really long release as well. So yeah, that's basically my live setup on the Alphabase. Pretty basic, like I said, just one pattern, which may seem not much, but I play 4/4 techno. I changed hats and some of those parameters live, and honestly, what I was really afraid of with the Alphabase is changing something unexpectedly, and it can sound pretty bad. Like if you have your tom channel doing the subs and it's sounding good, you don't want to mute it, and while muting it, changing the sample, which is a bit too easy to do, because this knob here is to change the sample, and it can happen quite easily. So it can easily ruin the vibe. So a good thing to do is when you're muting stuff is to go on a channel where you know there's nothing playing, like FM synth, or just get out of the trig edit mode, but it's still active for the instrument you're on. So yeah, you have to be a bit careful with this if you're live and you are very attentive, it works. I didn't do any mistake that time, so I was lucky, I guess. But yeah, it's one of the things I was afraid of. Another thing I was afraid of is to be in the out of the edit mode and change pattern by mistake. So yeah, changing sample by mistake, changing pattern by mistake, or a kit by mistake are basically the three things that would be very annoying and are unfortunately quite possible to do on the Alphabase. But by chance, nothing of that happened. So yeah. But in any case, it's a great sounding drum machine. I was really happy to hear it on a bigger system than my monitors at home, and I can't wait to hear it again on an even bigger system. Okay, so one thing that seemed to confuse a lot of people is how you get something MIDI to talk with something CV and gate. This is something, if you play live, you will have to think about it, because most of the time you're going to use either a MIDI synth or a MIDI drum machine, anything that needs clocking. And honestly, I found, to me, the easiest and most painless way is to use Pamela's new workout with a MIDI expander. This is the 4 HP MIDI expander where you have a full-size MIDI connector. You also have a DIN out if you're using an old school drum machine like a 808 or 909, whatever. And so there's also a 2 HP with a TRS MIDI connector. I don't have it, but I'm sure it works fine. And yeah, everything you have to do is lift your finger, push the yellow button. Your drum machine starts, your sequencer starts. And so we only hear the drum machine here, but if you bring anything from the modular, it's going to be perfectly in time. And you also have 8 outputs plus the fixed output of the expander to clock your sequencer, clock your sequential switches. So I think it sort of a double role in the modular, clock your drum machine and clock everything here. And it's really painless and easy. And I don't really want to think about this. I just want it to work. Okay, so now the fun part, the modular sounds. So I was a bit in agony, as you do before the show, before the Resilience live set, because my setup was basically much more complicated than this. And instead of the DFAM, I had usually what I use in the studio, which is a foundation oscillator, an amplitude and tone controller, and a dual 4-pole. And these made everything a bit too complicated. I also had a small Tirana sequencer. And yeah, there were too many parameters I had to keep track of. And so like 2 days before the show, I was like, this doesn't really work. I had like 40 minutes of music, but it wasn't really, I wasn't at ease with the modules. So yeah, I decided to remove an entire voice, leave a big gap in the modular, and bring in the DFAM, which I know the module well. It's self-contained, there's a sequencer, there's a good sounding filter, you have two oscillators and some great sounding noise. So yeah, I thought this is much easier. And yeah, I was in the middle of a breakdown. A friend of mine came by, asked me to show where I was with the live set, and I played like 10 minutes and I was much more confident already just with the DFAM in and less things to think about. Just one voice, that's it. Big sequencers. And yeah, that was much, much easier for me. So, of course, the DFAM is one voice. Then the second voice is the complex oscillator amp and tone multi-delay processor sequenced by the voltage multistage. As usual, this is the same in my studio setup. I use a multi-envelope to open the amp and tone, and this time I decided to route the multi-delay processor into the Kameniec phase rotator, a phaser. I like the phaser sounds. It's quite psychedelic, and especially with the reverb of the multi-delay processor into the phaser, it really makes some whooshy sounds that can be quite useful to make transitions. And so this was going into the scan pan, and basically I only used 2 channels of the scan pan and sent that into the 16-channel mixer they rented me. So the complex oscillator was 1 stereo channel, and I had another stereo channel for the modular, which was the DFAM and the Odessa. I mixed the DFAM and the Odessa in the Vermona quadruple, so I can send both into the DPLR delay, and so that makes another stereo channel going into the mixer. I obviously can't show you the mixer because it was a rent. I don't have an hardware mixer here. I always mix everything into Ableton just because of space and because that's convenient. So yeah, the third voice is Odessa, which is really I'd say the backbone of the synth parts of the entire show. Most of the big leads and sounds you hear throughout are mostly Odessa, and I do a lot of sub bass with it as well. And I use that. I route Odessa through the Bark filter processor, and this way I can split the bands, like use the lower bands to have a low sine going, a very low bass line to make sub bass, and then use the other bands and animate the other bands to make some synth or some percussions or whatever. And usually I take one out here and run that into the second channel of the LXD, and it was going into the scan and pan, so I could have some percussive notes. And the 8-stage sequencer programmer from Surge was sending pitch to the Odessa, but because this sequencer doesn't really have a trigger sequencer inside of it, you can obviously combine the pulse outputs with a combiner like this, but I prefer to use a separate trigger or gate sequencer like the Bean sequencer from Noise Engineering, which I think is very nice and fun to use. So this was sending gates to function, which was the envelope of the Odessa voice, and function is opening LXD, then going into the Bark filter processor. I think Odessa is very digital and proud of it, and it sounds amazing, but it's nice to have it going through an LPG and an analog, very characterful filter. I think it's the best of both worlds. And so the 8-stage sequencer is big and very easy and very legible, and it's only 5 volts, contrary to the voltage multistage, so it's quite easy to find a melody or dissonant melody that you like, and you just have to press a button to have to change the number of steps. And I was sending pulse outputs to my Bean sequencer to have it reset where I want it. So if I only want 3 steps, I just take this, plug it here, and it's going to be in the 3 last steps. So I usually start with 7 and then move to 5 or 7 or 3. Same with here, but it's a bit different. But if you've watched the demo of the low voltage multistage, you already know how to change the reset point. Actually, there's only the DFAM where you can't reset it, which is a bit of an oversight, but that's how it is. So yeah, these are the 3 voices, and as you can see, it's fairly basic. It's one big sequencer, one big oscillator, usually one filter or effect, and that's it. The few modules I haven't talked about are the random sampling, which I mostly use for modulation throughout. I don't think I've patched a lot of things during the set, so it was mostly like random, fluctuating random, going into maybe the filter of the DFAM or maybe into the timbre of the complex oscillator, maybe some random gates going here, but that's it, I think. And then of course the sequence selector used as a sequential switch, maybe to send some accents or some CV to the multi-envelope to give a different rhythm. And I also use Batumi, I think, for some parameters of Odessa, namely density and RUP, which have quite a drastic effect on the sound. But I think that's it. Yeah, like I said, the Vermuna quadruple I was using as a mixer to go into DPLR. As for the big 16-channel mixer, most of the channels were taken by the Alphabase. Basically, I recreated what I use at home with Ableton. So every channel is going separate into my sound card. So here I only use the channels on the Alphabase that I use, like kick, hats, clap, rim, crash, ride, and the stereo output for the samples. And the two stereo outputs of the modular, and that was it. So I asked for a mixer that had at least 2 stands. This one had 4, but I only used 2. Once again, for the sake of simplicity, I didn't bring the H9. I only brought the Space and the El Capistan. I know them well. I know how they sound. So that was plenty of effects for a live set. Plus you can't really hear precisely what you do on these kind of big speakers. It's not as precise as monitors, so that was more than enough. And there was also a master insert, and I put the overstay modular channel on the insert, which allowed me to EQ and boost and drive and compress everything, and also have a wonderful high-pass filter for nice DJ effect. So it's really handy to have, and honestly, it's making everything sound much better. So yeah, bit of a long explanation about the process of all this, but let's hear it now. Okay, now let's see how everything sounds. Just make sure, since all of these are analog sequencer, that they are where you wanted them to be. So these ones at the end, and this one is at the end as well. So then, like I said, press the yellow button and everything starts. Okay, so let's just start with the Alphabase. Basic sound. And we can bring Odessa. So I have a 7-step sequence here. And so my 7th step is resetting being sec, and I have just a few of the steps active. So Odessa is going through my LXD, then bark filter processor, then DPLR, and some space. I really like the multi-delay processor on its own to add atmosphere as well. I've shown that in the demo. It's really helpful for transitions. I can also bring my little output from the bark filter processor. I'm using a gate from the sequence selector to strike my second channel of LXD. It's never exactly the same because it's never happening at the same note every time. It's not much, but it adds some nice atmosphere. The old soapy sound trick, which I really love. So I can use, like, say, that moment to change the steps here, and maybe add a trick here to bring sort of another sequence. Of course, I forgot to press the button. Ideally, you do that before. One fun thing to do while you have that, which is the delay feedbacking, you cut the input and you just send an envelope into the VCA of the scan and pan, and that makes for percussion. Which you can modulate afterwards. You can modulate it with, say, random stuff. and it makes the illusion of a new sound where it's just a delay feedbacking. Of course, you can send some CV to dark filter. And have sort of a subsequence going. I mean, etc., etc. That's then you keep going. The idea is to then maybe stop with this and find a sequence on here which you can bring, and then leave Odessa in the background for a while. Maybe at some point change some of the toms of the Alphabase and bring back Odessa with a lower sound to take the place of the toms. Hopefully you'll be lucky with the complex oscillator. Some feedback. Might try to make a smoother transition in this, but yeah. Odessa is fantastic because it has 3 different modes with 1, 3 and 5 voices, and the sound is completely different. So as you can see, I only pushed 1 button and I didn't touch any of the knobs. You can tilt it towards the high notes. Whoops, sorry if the light changed quite drastically. My camera had a good idea to stop filming, so I had to start again, and I only realized a few hours later. So I hope this video helped, or at least showcased how I went about this resilience live set. So yeah, basically it's 3 voices, 3 analog sequencer, the surge, the verbose, and the one in the DFAM. They are quite similar in their own specific ways. They're all fun and immediate. Same with the oscillators. I know my way around that one. I know my way around that one. And I'm starting to know my way around Odessa. Yeah, it's visually easy to know where to go, and I think that's key here. And those are sound modules which I know. And the other thing that I think is very important in this setup that I chose, especially the voices, is that you can easily go from one sound to the next, even within the same voice, and you can also pretend that there's a lot more going on than just one oscillator, for example. So with the Odessa, I can really focus and narrow down bands and animate the bands of the bark filter, and really helps to make people think that there's 3 things going on at once, where basically it's just one oscillator and 12 bands of a filter. With the DFAM, you have the noise, you have the 2 different VCOs, you have the flick of a switch here, fast, slow, that really drastically changes the sound. You can do a lot of things with that, and even just a little modulation goes a very long way. The complex oscillator, I starting to know it like the back of my hand. There are a few go-to presets I usually come back to, and yeah, it's hard to make it sound bad. Like earlier in the video, you show I twisted the knobs like for 1 second. It immediately snapped into something that sounded good. I deliberately didn't take anything to preview the sounds. You have to know more or less where you go, but I know that when the knobs are in a certain position in a certain area, it's going to work. And you can always bring it a little, and then you're probably the only one who's going to hear it, and then you can adjust things, and it makes it more alive, I think, in a way. And same with the complex oscillator. With the multi-delay processor, you can make it sound like 3 different things. The multi-delay processor can be like a pad machine with the feedback and the reverb. You can make a feedback path with a filter and add some atmosphere. There's the Kaminiak that's at the end of the chain to add some phase movement. And yeah, that's very, very powerful for one voice, I think. And then it's mostly utility stuff. I didn't mention Batumi. I'm not using it here, but I seem to recall that during the live, I was using it to modulate some of the parameters on Odessa. The Muna quadruple is very utilitarian, like mixing VCA. There's an unused envelope in the multi-envelope, which I can always use to trigger an event with something, whatever. Nothing comes to mind here. I had also pre-patched the analog shift register to give me modulation to send around in the function decay, for example, full length or full time. or give accents to the ambient tone. There's plenty of things you can do. Stuff that I do a lot when I do music at home, and that I can quickly patch in a live situation to just give some pepper to the sound. So the technique is nothing crazy. It's very, very repetitive, but it's just having the sound move a little, fade one in, take one out. You can even bring back some sounds. I mean, when I like something, I tend to write it for a while, like 10 minutes, but always try to have something going either on the Alphabase or on the Modular. Just make a small send or move the envelope a little or animate stuff, or I don't know. The key thing is to have visual module where you know what it's doing, and you don't have to unpatch anything. You know, there are all these gates output. So you think, oh, I want to put some accents. You just take a gate output and put it into the envelope, for example, and beam, the sound is already changing. So yeah, nothing crazy. That's basically all the techniques I always rave about. But this time it's a bit different. It was a context of a live set where you probably don't have time to think about stuff too much, which can lead to good mistakes, bad mistakes. So yeah, the whole deal is mitigating those bad mistakes and trying to surprise yourself. And I think I did at some moments, and it was very nice. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the Resilience live set, and I think they did a great job with the video, and I hope you liked it and enjoyed it in front of your screens. See you!